Hi, everybody. I'm going to go through a couple of slides for each chapter, and then there'll be more slides towards the end. And enriched with quotes from Trollope's pen. I will read most of the quotes, but not going to read everything because I want us to sort of stay on time so we can get into a thrill-a-minute breakout rooms, which are always fun. Chapter 25, Chiswick Gardens. An amusing interlude and with a lot of serious events going on. Mrs. Val, who I find patronizing, Clementina Golightly, just love that name. The Woodward sisters and the Neverbrand sisters, they attend the flower show to see, but mostly to be seen. And then the dandy, forgive my French pronunciation, it's dreadful. Victoire Jacques Tanop, he's just aiming for Clementina and get her money and just thrilled with the idea of having 20,000 pounds or 500,000 French francs. For her first day in public, the very young Katie, and it's very interesting how she matures to some extent throughout these chapters. She's stuck walking with the boring Frenchman, and I'm not going to screw up another French name. She escapes. Charlie, her love of life, arrives. She gives him the purse they made. They ramble happily throughout the show, and eyes full of love. And she just her passion for him, or if she understands the passion, but she's madly in love with Charlie. She goes to her first ball. Clementina's soon-to-be guardian Alaric browbeats Charlie about marrying the wealthy lady, a deuced fine girl, and Charlie rejects the idea. And then Katie was reproached with having danced a Frenchman to death in the evening, uh, in revenge for his having bored her in the morning. And he danced no more that evening, sort of crashed, and very soon left the house. Excelsior, repeated a number of times here. Katie, exhausted and ill from dancing, pines for Charlie, whom, when they parted, she urged him to try to be steady. Monsieur Jacques, you know what I mean, proposes marriage to Clementina. And how delightful to have such a dancer for her lover, thought Clementina. That was her Excelsior. I need to move something down here. Okay. Mrs. Davis urges Nora to marry Mr. Peppermint, another great name, a widower with three young children. But Nora really, who was not a bad woman, when Mrs. Davis saw how Nora took to heart her sad fate, she resolved to do one more try. So she dressed herself very nicely, put on her best bonnet, and when did something very unprecedented, went to the International Navigation Office and called on Charlie in the middle of his office. Okay. Um, Very funny scene there. You know, all his colleagues are looking around and they're wondering what's happening. She confronts Mr. Tudor, will you be so good as to tell me what is you're going to do this about this poor girl? The only way Charlie could get Mrs. Davis out of there was to say, Saturday evening, I will come to the Cat and Whistle with the view of then and there settling what he meant to do about that girl. And she left. More in this chapter. Mr. Jobbles, another fascinating character, um, wanted to crush patronage at a blow, and he resigned in opposition to Sir Gregory. Hardlines, who had initiated the examination, thought that it would be enough for the president. They merely provided that everyone admitted into the service should be educated in such a manner as to be fit for any profession or calling under the sun, and that, with this slight proviso, the question of patronage might remain untouched. So Jobbles resigned. Hardlines then promoted his number two, the relentlessly ambitious Alaric, Alaric, my pronunciation is awful, to fill Jobbles' position. Well, on Saturday, Charlie wasn't going to show up at the pub because he's arrested for non-payment of a bill owed to the tailor. Landlady Mrs. Richards, who has a heart of gold, learns of Charlie's predicament when a messenger paid on credit by the moneylender goes to his lodgings to bring his personal effects in the sponging house, which was a new term that I learned. She takes the train to Hampton to inform the Woodwards and Harry Norman, who could save the irresponsible Charlie. Katie freaks out. She's in agony. She shuts her eyes. And Mrs. Woodward has a revelation. She was indeed sorry to hear about Charlie's difficulties, but her grief was now deeper than that because she now recognized the sort of feeling which her child evinced for this young man. She could not think that these passionate bursts of overpowering sorrow were the results of mere childish friendship. She could see that Katie's bosom now held a woman's heart, and that that heart was no longer her own. When Harry arrives, hysterical Katie implores him, "You got to get Charlie out." And as soon as Norman was gone, she went to bed. And in the morning, she was pronounced to be too unwell to get up. I must admit, I find Katie's sort of illnesses a bit extreme, but then again, she was, what was she, 16 back then? Indeed, she was far from well, and during the night, she only slept. She was restless and uneasy, and when she woke up, she would burst into tears and lie sob hysterically. In the morning, Mrs. Woodward said something about Charlie's misconduct, and then Katie went bonkers again. Nothing would rouse her until her mother promised that the prodigal should not be thrown over and abandoned. On the Sunday afternoon, Norman came back with the tidings, the good tidings that Charlie was once more a free man. Oh, this was great fun. The electors for the district, I don't want to screw up the pronunciation, disgusted by the roguery of Mr. McBuffer and anxiously on the alert to replace him by a strictly honest man, thus sick, returned our friend Undy by a glorious majority. Alaric obtained full control of Miss Golightly's fortune, for Figgs, his co-trustee, was basically a non-entity. He obtained the full control of £20,000, and out of it he paid the calls due upon for the shares held both by himself and Undy Scott. Thus Alaric Tudor had become a rogue, and was obliged, as it were, in his own defense, to consort with a rogue. He went down to Scotland with Undy, leaving his wife and child at home, not because he could thus best amuse his first leisure days, but because this new work of his new obsession, this laborious trade of roguery, allowed him no leisure days. When can villainy have either days or hours of leisure? The title of this chapter is just so good. Easy as the slope of hell. Undy had succeeded in persuading his friend that the game got to be played. If a man's going to make a fortune in the share market, you got to be consistent. You got to be bold. You can't be bold and timid on the next day. All these valuable lessons did Undy Scott teach to Alaric Tudor, and the result was that he agreed to order for self and partner a considerable number of shares in their next venture, the Limehouse Bridge Company. Easy, very easy as the slope of hell. And so from morning to morning and from night to night, they just talked about all of their shenanigans. On his return to town, Alaric found a letter from Captain Cutwater pressing very urgently for the repayment of his money. Alaric basically took another piece of money out of the fortune of the now Madame Jacques Tenap, and his money was sent to Captain Cutwater. Mrs. Woodward's request back at Hampton. Katie was ill and wretched. Charlie hadn't been invited back since his arrest, knowing would he show up uninvited. Katie asks Linda why Mrs. Woodward would not invite Charlie. At last, with much hesitation, Linda told her whole tale. Perhaps Mama thinks you were too fond of Charlie. An epiphany. Katie recognized, she understood the whole issue. To reveal to her the secret of her own love of her mother's fears. And after that, Katie spoke no further of Charlie. It was more and more withdrawn. But it was evident, though she said nothing, she had not ceased to think of him. And she seemed to be withered before all their eyes, got weaker than ever. And poor Mrs. Woodward, who was a good soul, was overcome with sorrow. Well, Mrs. Woodward invites Charlie to Hampton, and she asks Charlie to promise not to see Katie anymore. And he weeps. And next morning, and this is a very sad event, Charlie, who was staying at the inn, knocks on the door. I think the kitchen maid lets him in, and surreptitiously places in Katie's needlework workbox the purse which she had given to him with such fondness at the Chiswick Flower Show. How Apollo saved the Navy. Well, the chapter begins with, for the sake of Katie's lungs, and it was interesting. I don't think the physician really diagnosed any specific organic illness, but she was clearly weak. They invited her to spend 6 months at Torquay for its mild climate. Katie had again learned how to smile, but not to laugh, like the gay, ringing silver laughter that just endeared her to everybody. While there, Linda and Norman became engaged, and he insisted that she not see her brother-in-law Alaric, whom he detested, and she agreed to that. Charlie, back in London, decided since he was banned from seeing Katie, he might as well continue on the plan, whom he loved dearly. He would return to the Cat and Whistle and keep his promise and marry Nora Garrity, and he would utterly go to destruction and sever himself forever from all that is valuable in the world. Not very admirable on any counts, but well, maybe he felt he had no choice. Entering the pub, Charlie at once saw that something wonderful was going on and learned to his delight that Nora and the lucky Mr. Peppermint were married that morning. Now it's chapter jumps back to Alaric, who was excelling as Sir Gregory's number two, when he told his member he intended to seek a seat in Parliament, and Sir Gregory thought it was foolish to give up his annual salary of £1,200. The undertaking to which Undy and Alaric were now both wedded was a Limehouse in the bridge. Sorry, guys. Of this, Undy was chairman and Alaric was a director, and they were hoping to make a lot of money. And if the committee of the House of Commons, about to make an inquiry, approved of the necessity of the bridge in question, and if that happened, they'd make a lot of money. This was a fun and complicated chapter, and I'm basically brushing over a few things because I must admit I found it. I mean, as Dominic said, there's a lot of complicated stuff going on here, but this was not complicated. The description of the parliamentary committee to a vicious sport among the downs of Hampshire, with the bulldog chasing the badger, bite him, go back and forth, and a baiting match. And then the committee stars with a delightfully named Mr. No-Go and Mr. Vigil. I mean, just once again, Trollope having fun. Well, at last the resolution, after tons of discussion and I think 1,500 questions or 2,500 questions, whatever it was, that this committee is not prepared under existing circumstances to recommend a grant of public money for the purpose of erecting a bridge at Limehouse. The committee considers that the matter is still open should further evidence be adduced. And they also had like a massive volume of committee records, which basically just, as good as went into the dumpster. Well, to stand or not to stand, Sir Gregory was very upset that at the possibility that if Alaric was elected as an MP to the Scots pocket borough and permitted to also hold his commissioner office, Alaric would very soon become the first fiddle at the Civil Service Examination Board. He tries to talk the ambitious Alaric out of standing for Parliament. Alaric refuses. Alaric talks to his Gertrude, knowing full well that she'd go along with whatever he wanted her to do. And then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, after meeting with the Prime Minister, tells Alaric, I'm not going to stand in your way. Okay, as we build to this conclusion here, chapter 34. The parliamentary committee went back and did inquiries regarding the bridge, and the share price went up 20%. Now then was the time for Alaric to sell and get out of his difficulties. He was strongly of the opinion that they would fall again. The final result, basically, the shares would be worthless. But he couldn't act in the matter without consulting Undy because they were so wrapped together. And even at the present price, would not enable him to pay the full amount he had taken. So Alaric urges Undy to sell, and Undy refuses. Alaric says, to enable you to lend you the £5,000 and to enable me to join you in this speculation, £10,000 has been withdrawn from Clementina's fortune. I know nothing about that, said Scott. Know nothing about it, said Alaric, looking at him with withering scorn. But Undy was not made of withering material and did not care a straw for his friend's scorn. Alaric continues to make his case, but Undy is defiant. Undy grabs his quote and threatens to tell his brother's wife, Mrs. Val, what has become of her daughter's money. Undy dismisses the threat. Well, now tell me, what is to hinder you from letting me have the money you owe me? Only this, that old McClory holds the shares. So till I have redeemed them from McClory, I have no power of selling. Alaric is devastated. He knows he's stuck. That the money which had been trusted to his honor and safekeeping had been thrown into a bottomless gulf. Undy then tells Alaric that his disreputable brother Val insists upon having 250 shares, with Alaric either purchasing them with his stepdaughter's money or Alaric signing 250 of his shares to Val. And by the way, Val would assist you at his candidacy for Parliament. Alaric was so astonished at this monstrous request for a bribe. When he heard this, he looked up into his companion's face to see whether he was talking to the evil one himself. But what a net of ruin was closing around him? How inextricable were the toils into which he had fallen? Undy reminds Alaric that he himself had been bribed with shares for the mine investigation. Alaric goes home a wretched man, realizing, as Trollope says, he was in the hands of these men, these miscreants, these devils. He was completely at their mercy. Well, Mrs. Val shows up at Gertrude and Alaric's house. Once again, patronizing. dance man daughter Clementina. And Mrs. Neverbend, formerly admirers of Gertrude, now sycophants to Mrs. Val, they visit Gertrude at home, and she's not happy to have them show up. Mrs. Val encourages Gertrude to talk Alaric out of running for Parliament and says she is considering moving him as Clementina's financial trustee. Gertrude is displeased. Clementina invites Gertrude to our little dance. Thank you, said Gertrude, but I never dance now, and she was committed to never go to Mrs. Val's house again. The last chapter. Sir Gregory asks Alaric if he had finally made up his mind to address the electors for the pocket barrel. No, not finally, but I think I shall do so. And then basically Sir Gregory says, I think you're behaving with ingratitude. You're not going to have my approval. Returning home, Gertrude spills the whole tale of Mrs. Val's impertinence. She asks if he's going to give up the trust. He says he will think about it and needs to consult the phantom co-trustee of Figs. The next day, he receives a note from Undy, very short, very brief. Is Val to have the shares? Let me have a line by the bearer. Alaric replies to make an appointment to meet Undy before dinner at Alaric's own office. They argue. Neither relents. Undy says, you have one way of escape, and I don't want to ruin you. I'll save you if I can. I think you've treated this girl in a most shameful way. Nevertheless, I'll save you if I can, but mark this, if the money be not at once produced, I cannot save you. Now look here, Scott. You've threatened me with ruin and a prison, and I will not say, but your threats may prove possibly true. It may be that I'm ruined, but if I fall, you should share my fall. That's false, Undy said. I'm free to hold my head above the world, which you are not. I have nothing to bring me shame. You will probably hear from Mrs. Val and her daughter tomorrow. Well, the following Monday, Mrs. Val sent a note insisting he visit as she wished to communicate with him on the subject of her daughter's fortune. He replied he would call her at home the next morning, at her home, rather. He mulled his options and consulted his broker in the city, who described his shares as a ticklish stock. Alaric knew the man was right, but nevertheless he made up his mind to hold on a little longer. You sort of want to say, you're an idiot! Adding to his misery, he read in the evening paper that the Scots seat will be filled by the Honorable Captain Valentine Scott. The next morning, he meets with Mrs. Val, Captain Val, and Clementina's husband. She asks how his daughter's money has been invested. He replies, invested in funds. She replies, rumored that funds have been used for speculations. Alaric refuses to be cross-examined. I shall not condescend to go into any details as to her fortune, but I talked to my co-trustee. I may have missed the whole line. He promises that on Saturday next, he'll be ready to give up the trust to any person who may be legally appointed to receive it, and then will produce all the property that has been entrusted to my keeping. I don't know how he's going to pull that off. And do you say, Mr. Tudor, that you will not answer my question, said Mrs. Scott. I mean to say most positively, I will not answer no questions, said Alaric. Oh, confound it. Not do it all, damn, said the captain. The girl's money is all gone and you won't answer questions. No, Alaric shouted, walking across the room till he closely confronted the captain. No, I will answer no questions that may be asked in your hearing, but that your wife's presence protects you, I would kick thee down your own stairs before me. Captain Val stepped back. He could treat more. He wiped his mustache with both hands at once. Mrs. Val screamed. Victoire took at the back of the chair as thought he would be armed in the general battle, and Alaric, without further speech, walked out of the room and went away to his office. So you've given up the going for Parliament, said Sir Gregory to him in the course of the day. I think I have, considering all things. I believe it will be the best for me to do. Not a doubt of it, said Sir Gregory, not a doubt of it, my dear fellow. And he began to evince, by the cordiality of his official confidence, that he had fully taken Alaric back into his good graces. It was nothing to him that the Scottsborough had been given up Alaric instead of Alaric giving up the Pocketborough. He was sufficiently pleased at knowing that the danger of his being supplanted by his own junior was over. Then Alaric again went into the weary city, again made inquiries about his shares, and again returned to his office and thence to his home. On return to his office, he found lying on his table a note written by Undy, but not signed, interesting, in which he was informed that things would yet be well if the required shares should be forthcoming on the following day. He crumpled the note tight in his hand and was about to fling it among the waste paper, recognizing this is evidence, smoothed the paper out, folded it, laid it carefully on his desk. That day, on his visit into the city, he had found that the bridge shares had fallen to less than the value of their original purchase money, and that evening he told Gertrude everything. The author does not dare to describe the telling. Some questions for the breakout rooms. Major characters listed on the left, secondary characters. Which characters do you admire and why? Who do you not admire and why? I think we know an answer to that, at least about Undy, but I shouldn't be leading the jury. And about whom do you have mixed feelings? So, Don, I'm going to stop sharing, if that's okay.